everyone. 6:30 a.m. Portugal time. What time is it where you are, Rick?
In the afternoon.
Oh, that's not so bad, is it? It's still pitch black here. I've got my blue sky fake screen up just to cheer everyone up. It's been raining for days here. How do you cope with so much rain, Rick? Because I know in Bali you get lots of rain, don't you?
We get lots of it. And in fact, we've had a wet season all the way through the dry season this year. So
okay.
it's raining. It rains every day. Beautiful, clear mornings. And then around about 12 o'clock, it starts raining. And it can go on in the afternoon. Lots of rain.
Yeah.
And last night,
Yep.
we had a little bonus. We had 4 earth tremors.
Oh my goodness.
You could call them earthquakes, but I call them tremors.
Yeah, don't want to
I don't want to get out of bed unless it's a 7.6 on the Richter scale.
Rick, you're so spoiled over there in Indonesia. Anyway, thank you for joining us wherever you're joining us from today. So as you've got from there, Rick's in Indonesia, Bali. I'm sat not far from Lisbon. And we're here today to talk about staying centered at Christmas. Now, just before we came on air, Rick said to me, well, let's see how this goes. I wonder what kind of trouble or something like that. Like, I wonder what kind of trouble we could get into with this subject. What were you referring to exactly, may I ask?
Well, not everybody celebrates Christmas.
That's true.
And
I just said holidays.
Not everybody's a Christian. Not everybody is a Christian.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's generally conceived of as a holiday around the world, but not all cultures celebrate it. So we shall have to choose our words carefully, lest we offend someone.
Okay, well, because I'm a grown-up and you're a grown-up as well, and most people watching this, when they do watch this, will be grown-ups. I'm just going to say, you know what, if I make a mistake and embarrass you or upset you or offend you or trigger you, that's not my intention. And all I want is for us to sort of enjoy massive amounts of peace and joy and understanding. So please forgive me in advance. We're really talking. Yes, you're right. I mean, this title might just only appeal to Westerners sort of raised in a sort of Christian-ish environment, or with a sort of like back culture of that. But I guess we could change it to holidays. I might change the title post-production, but it's quite an intense time all over. You know, I was chatting on Carl's show yesterday, Good Morning Portugal, and we had a couple of people on talking in terms of like the rates of suicides go during this time. And it just occurred to me, you know, this is our last show of the year. It would be good to talk around the pitfalls and what goes on at this time of year and what we could look out for, but also how we might cope with it a bit better. I'm also reminded, my mum and my sister and I are in a WhatsApp group, and my sister sent pictures of her Christmas tree and all that. And then my mum sent a picture of a card, and I looked at this card and my whole heart and like my energy just dropped, because I remember it was a card that I made for everyone, telling everyone my sad story and how I didn't want to celebrate Christmas one year or my birthday, which comes just before it. And I just wanted nothing to do with it. And I actually remember there have been a couple of Christmases where I've been in a lot of pain myself and not known how to get out of the festivities. So that's some of the additional context. So where should we dive in?
Well, we've sort of dived in already. We could change it from staying centered during the holidays, but we could just say staying centered.
Yes.
And that would cover every 365 days of the year.
Yeah.
But what you're saying, you know, we're speaking from a very Western perspective.
Yeah.
But just of late, I've been very grateful and I feel very blessed on the life that we have. And I know you do too. And many people that are coming through here are feeling that blessing of the joy and gift of. It's made me reflect on the virtual millions of refugees that have had to leave their country, right? Basically, probably with a rucksack or a suitcase to their name, go to a completely different culture, with no income, with no family support, unless the immediate family is there, just their lives torn apart. And we tend to celebrate, not everybody, Christmas with some lavish food and sometimes some extravagance, some presents, things like that. And I think just contemplating how grateful we are for what we have, and then contemplate and send reams of love and compassion to those that will miss out, if they may in a Christian environment, but they will virtually miss out on what we are experiencing when we're not in those environments. So it's just a thought, not a downtrodden one, but just an opportunity to express our compassion for people who are way better, worse off than we are in our circumstances. And I think Christmas, compassion is foremost. All right. If we are looking at the story that is around that, then there's a lot of love and a lot of compassion built around Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, Christ Mass, of that. And I think for me, it's a reminder, let's try and emulate some of those beautiful characteristics, those values that were imbued in that person and carried forward to virtually millions of people around the world. That's my little soapbox for the day.
Wow, that soapbox kind of took me on a massive journey, I have to say. I wasn't quite expecting that, but yes, actually, I do see that our picture today wouldn't be full or rich without having that as a background. I really like your choice of words there, because you talk about the stories that we have about this time of year, and the stories we have about the qualities imbued in this particular person, which is obviously Jesus. And I'm also, after listening to you, I'm also got very clearly in my mind also, for many years, I've had the story that, Christmas is very commercial. And so it's very easy to kind of humbug it out of existence in my head, and kind of be a bit superior about it and say, I'm not going to participate, because it's all just a massive gimmick. And of course, at that level, it really is. I'm also really mindful of other information that I have about Christmas and the solstice time, and where our festivities and celebrations come from, the true meaning behind them. But that might be a sort of like conspiratorial rabbit hole.
Well, what about giving us a brief overview of the astrological message or the time?
Okay. Yeah, do you know what? Can I park that towards the end of it of our show?
Sure.
But yeah, what I'd like to pick up on in particular is what you mentioned in terms of gratitude and compassion, and the word that really came through to me was receivership. Because like the ideas of love, this is something I'm working on myself at the moment. In terms of gifts, however we're gift giving at the moment, and whatever this time of year is about, you can only be present to the gifts of what we have, and the amazing people we might have in our lives, and our breath and things like that. You can only really be aware of them if you're open to receiving.
Yes.
And you can't really give, I don't think, without receiving a connection with somebody. Without that connection, you can't truly give. So one of my hot top subjects for today, I would be, how can we receive more? Like when I think about that, one of the things that comes up is, or one of my old things that I would say is like, I don't deserve more, or why would I receive more? I mean, we're not talking about, like Christmas list from the 1980s where I wanted a Barbie dream house. Really, I just want to be able to receive the gifts of love from my family and friends, and have a nice time. But even that takes a certain amount of receivership, an allowance It also brings up, for me, ideas of trust and vulnerability. Ooh, we've got someone joining us. Because if you're not vulnerable enough to trust people, you're not really going to receive anything in a nice way. So I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Now, let me share my thoughts with that. And I concur with what you're saying exactly. However, there's two forms of giving. Mm-hmm. One is to give with no expectations. So I have a pen here and I want to give it to somebody, and I'm giving it to from my heart, genuinely, with no obligation and no expectations in return. Mm-hmm. So the moment that person reaches for it and takes it from me and I let go, that very moment, it's no longer mine.
Yep.
So there's no obligation, and there's no expectation I will get anything in return. It's the pure joy of giving without any chattels associated with it. Okay. The other way of giving is with an intent. Well, I'll give you a present with the expectation that you'll give me something. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this is woven into this this period of time where we're saying, well, I need to give. They gave us something last year, and I need to give them something back this year, and it gets there's an obligation, right? And that's not the true loving gesture of giving freely from the heart. So that person could take that pen and say, I don't want a pen, or it's a useless pen, all right? Or I'm going to give it away. And I have absolutely no ownership whatsoever the moment I let it go. And this is a big one because we've been kind of trained. It goes around who you invite to your wedding, who you buy birthday presents for, and all this gift giving can be very highly distorted into an obligation. And that's, to some degree, depending on where you are, can impact on this holiday season. So that's just another aspect of it.
Yes, I think that's a really big one, actually, because yes, it that really ties in with the sort of vulnerability and trust. When I feel that people are giving to us in such a way that there's not any real trust built, or I don't feel much trust, I feel very much caught in an obligation loop, and feel very uncomfortable. Yeah, I like that. Thank you so much. So, okay, so there's a couple of, that's two things. Like, how can we, well, you've explained how we can give without creating that sense of obligation. I think that's essential. It's a must have if you're a parent with small children, because you build up these ideas of these, you know, how this present might be used and how great it's going to be for a child. And they open it and they're so honest, aren't they, in their appraisal of things.
Yes. Yes.
And they like chuck it out, cast it aside, and really not interested. Yeah. But also like those sort of backhanded gifts that you might get from parents, or, you know, people that you maybe I've got terrible people in my life. I don't think I do, but or maybe I'm just really judgmental. But you know when people give you deodorant and you think, oh, really? Or they get you some new makeup and you're like, oh, what was wrong with how I looked? Or so we like giving, receiving, and obligation seem to be really big ones. Yes. Something else I'd like to put on the list to sort of explore as well is how we might, because obviously at the moment we're just exploring and like putting these things on the table. If I was doing this as a training session, I'd be writing up all these on a flip chart right now. So we've got to do this, 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 and this. Something else I'd like to put onto the table is like food wars. You know, like when you go to somebody's house and you might have food needs and they're not provided for, or when people try to force their way of eating onto you. So like food is another sort of hot topic. Can you think of any other? And then we'll have a look more at the sort of coping strategy.
Well, on the topic of food, if we can get invited to somebody's place, there seems to be an obligation that we have to invite them back to our place.
Oh, yeah.
And I do believe in an energy exchange. I
Yeah.
don't dispute that. But if you didn't enjoy yourself at the dinner, and the conversation was not uplifting, it was all depressing and about everything that's going wrong, and it wasn't a particularly enjoyable night, and you'll know that the moment you get back in the car or when you leave, right? It is you by asking the question, would I have this experience again? It's not the people, but do I want this experience?
Yeah.
Right? And I might decide that no, I didn't really enjoy the experience, so I wouldn't necessarily encourage that. And I've got to a point now, when I'm old enough and silly enough not to worry about what people think. Right? It's only what I think about myself that's important.
Yeah.
Right? If I value myself and my life, then, and I have enough self-love, it's not going to bother me if people have a different opinion about me. And I'm not going to let it sway what I do. But I believe I didn't come into this incarnation to go around pleasing people. I've been a people pleaser, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
So it's a thin line, isn't it, between pleasing people, trying to keep a balance, keep an energy flow going. And in the end, we have to make a decision as to what we want to do. And hopefully people won't be offended. But if they did get offended, whose offense was that? We might have triggered it, but somebody sitting have been offended. And you started off by apologizing in case I said something. Only the ego offended. You, the infinite being, me, the consciousness that we are, right, cannot be offended. Infinitenessly cannot be offended. We are the animators of these bodies, but the ego can grab hold of something and saying, 20 years ago, you told me my bum looks fat in those jeans, and I can hang on to that for 20 years. Offended. Only the ego can be offended. Yeah. So back to you.
Okay. Well,
try and offend me if you can.
No, I have no intention of that. You actually raised another great thing. I mean, this is the worst time of year, I think, for people who are stuck in people pleasing. Traditional people pleasers, people with whom maybe feel very sort of insecure in themselves, desperately want to be loved, desperately, wanting to help other people feel good about themselves. This is a terrible time of year for people like that, because the opportunities to have all of your insecurities completely overwhelmed is huge, because we're not responsible for other people's how they receive things, like you said. B, you can't force somebody to cheer up, and people are going to do their own thing. So it's a very, very sort of difficult time. I understand that. In terms of offense, what I would consider is, because I think we've explored some of the big things that we think could come up, and I'm sure others will. So, on this list I've got is giving, receiving, the concept of obligation, and people pleasing, and whose offense, and managing other people's emotions, I think is a big one. What I'd like to sort of move us to now is how we might help people in having a strategy, or having a group of strategies, and they don't have to be spiritual, they can just be very practical, so that they can cope. The first one that speaks to mind and it comes to mind, and this was when you were talking about the reciprocity of having people over and also feeling a bit trapped at somebody's house. we've all been there, haven't we? Where we've been at someone's house and you feel like you can't leave. You know, there's signaling that there's another course or something. What Carl and I have, and I'm very grateful for this, and we've only had to use it once, is we have a secret code word. And we came up with this the year we met, and this is a secret trusted code word between us that we've had, and every now and again we just remind each other of what that word is, especially when we go somewhere, you know, which might be highly emotionally charged. And the whole idea is this word could come out into the conversation. It's weird enough and unusual enough that no one's going to randomly say it. And yet it's not so bizarre that it might come into a conversation. So we are very mindful of watching each other's peace of mind and knowing that if this word comes up, then it's time for us to make excuses and to leave. Now, we do have some people that we're very grateful to know who we can say, do you know what, we're just not feeling it now, and we can just go. And those kinds of relationships are gold, aren't they? You know, where you can be really honest and just understand that, you know, things have changed and you just want to hop it. But for most people, you probably do need to make up an excuse, you know, like, you know, I'm not feeling so good, or I need to leave now. And it's your own call about how you might do it. I mean, we tend to, like, Carl won't let me lie. Like, he'll say, that was a white lie, you must stop that. So with this kind of, we hold each other accountable in terms of white lies. So we will always find a way to do it honestly. But, you know, it's not for me to judge in terms of white lies. But having some kind of escape plan, I think, is important. Can you think of escaping?
Well, I first of all, I'd like to know what the code word is, because if I'm ever at dinner with you guys and I hear that, I'll go and bolt the door so you can't make a bolt for the door.
I'm not saying.
I tend to, I'll evaluate a circumstance. My whole life is about evaluating the quality of the experience I have. I think I've mentioned this before. The experience of this food, the experience of this book, this movie, this place, these circumstances. I'm aiming to divest myself of the lower vibration frequency type of experiences and replace them with uplifting, stimulating, inspiring experience. Of course, not everybody is like that.
No.
And especially when it comes to family, there's different, I don't mean to say it from an view, but there are different versions of consciousness and consciousness. And so we can't just pinpoint, I'm just going to hang out with these guys. There seems to be some obligation, but I am selective, and sometimes I'll just graciously decline. As graciously as I can. But if I find myself in there, I will consciously try to inject something that is more uplifting, steer people away from you can get the energy of the mood swinging down when about, various circumstances and situation. And it's very easy to get caught up in that, and it can go on for hours. So what I'll consciously do is try and uplift that conversation and move it away from that, not because it disturbs me, but because I can feel the overall energy of the place just drop. And, you know, you and I are empaths, so we feel this deeply. We can, the moment it goes off the boil, I sense it. And I want to bring it back up onto the boil again. So that's a strategy that I would apply. And then also I find that I'm either attracted to people that are on the sort of same wavelength, or they're attracted to me. And so all of the stuff can happen around me, and yet I found a little island of like-minded conversation, and it's staggering how often that happens as well. And it's not really a strategy. I don't set out to make that happen. It just seems seems to arise. So.
That's interesting. It reminds me of so many different things. And I mean, I can see we've had people listening all the way through this, and I'm wondering, what your favorite strategies or thoughts are in terms of coping, with this subject matter. But I don't know where to start, actually. Like, the first thing, you were talking about empaths and the idea of like sensing energy. And one of the things that I often get stressed out with, not so much with friends, but very much in terms of being around my family, you're talking about people meeting you with a different level of consciousness. Like, people are on their own journey, and nothing really brings you right back down to earth than being with your family. If you're like the potential black sheep or the empath, or the odd one out, or if you don't fit in with a sort of family ethos. And so I find myself leading up to these big events, almost starting to squeeze myself back into the shape that I used to be in when I was part of that family, like living with that family. And I heard it referred to the other day as equalization, where you're trying to equal yourself. So you might be, without like trying to cause offense to anyone, you might be like dumbing down aspects of yourself. You might not be as loud or as free or as spontaneous. And I can see that causes a lot of stress. So now I'm getting conscious of the fact that is one of the things I do. I'm asking myself questions like, how can I be in this company right now without squashing myself? How can I be me? How can I feel safe to be me? And seeing what ideas my unconscious mind comes up with, because I think when we challenge ourselves with these good questions, then we often give ourselves the answers. We come up with a lot of things, but when you're thinking ahead, oh God, here we go again. Oh God, we start to get into a very unresourceful place.
Yes.
And then our true gifts of empathy and kindness and compassion they're really not that much use to us, I think, in when we're not able to see possibilities. So I think noticing that that's what you might have done in the past is like one of the first key things, and then thinking, okay, how can I talk to myself in such a way to prepare myself? How can I know that? And also have something, after you've come out of that interaction, some kind of ceremony for yourself or acknowledgement that you're casting off the energy and you're calling all parts of yourself back into you. So that you really feel yourself and you're not carrying something that you've picked up from somebody else. And which brings me to my next thing, is that who does this energy, or who does this offense, or who does this belong to? Like, why am I carrying this? I'm feeling uneasy. Who does it belong to? Because an empath in a room of people who are insecure and upset and people pleasing in their own right, I mean, like it's difficult, isn't it? It's like going into an empathy war zone. There was one more thing. I can't think what it was now. Oh, and this is more of a practical, and it could be quite a, I don't know. There's a word I'm looking for. I can't remember, but it's a very practical suggestion. This is something that both Carl and I automatically do. Is we find the person that would be most grateful for our attention to hang out with, at one of these social gatherings. So we might spend time with the children that are being ignored, or we might go and spend time with the nutty old uncle in the corner, or the grandma that everyone is kind of dismissing because she's a little bit, a little bit away with the fairies. And so we will make a beeline for those people, because we know we can have a time of gratitude and have some fun, because it's always great to spend time with people that you have a different viewpoint with, I think.
Yes.
I love people that sit on the outside of these events, because you really do get a different view of what's really going on. Like, you get an outsider's view, or a way shower's view, and they can see what's going on as well. They can see all the BS, and they kind of stay out of it with their little, going mad or being a child. They have their own ways of coping. Has that brought up some things for you? Have I lost you? It looks like you're about to pick your nose, Rick. Do you know what? I love how the internet connection between Portugal and Bali sometimes fails mid-live stream. So for those of you that are watching right now, let us know. Pop something in the chat room, please. It would be lovely to hear what's going on, and maybe some of your Christmas stories have gone wrong. Now, one of the things that we were talking about earlier, because on this kind of list that we've been forming in terms of how to cope with Christmas, we were talking in terms of gratitude. We're also talking in terms of receiving and how to be okay with that. So giving, receiving, and then the obligation. It looks like I've lost Rick. Whoops. Hopefully he'll be back shortly. So obviously, this is a time when you might be gifted something or want to be gifting others, and also wondering how to receive. Right at the start, I was talking about receivership, and if we're not feeling completely okay in ourselves, it's sometimes very difficult to enjoy that feeling of being worthy enough to receive. We feel tearful, especially if it's at Christmas and you're really not wanting to be there. I don't know if any of you have ever felt like that. I've had 2 Christmases where I just felt like an absolute failure. Really talking from the heart now. I felt like a failure, felt like I hadn't achieved anything, felt like my life was a mess. And the last thing I wanted to do was be celebrated around the time of Christmas. I mean, obviously Christmas is, about celebrating other things, but at some level we're celebrating each other when we're gifting people. And so I think if you really want to be out of Christmas and you recognize that it's going to make you feel worse being around other people, then it's okay to create your own celebration in your own way, and just to say, you know what, this year I'm doing something different. This year I'm practicing something different. I really don't think you should feel obliged to go around to somebody's house if it makes you, by comparison, feel worse. So find a way to excuse yourself in such a way that you don't feel like there's other obligations and upsets to deal with. Also think, who am I doing this for? Whose pressure is this? Is somebody putting pressure on me, or am I dishing it on myself? Get really, really clear about what's yours and what's not. And once you're really clear on that, then you can take the next step of, letting people know, actually, this time it's not for me and I'm going to decline. And then plan something really great for yourself. Plan something nourishing. Plan something that might really suit you. Hello. It's good that you
back.
Out there,
I'm
Rick.
back.
When you left, you had your finger right there. It looked like you were going to dig deep.
I might have been doing a breathing exercise. The internet temporarily became an outer net. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just talking about, if you're really not feeling it and you're not really, just talking from my own experience of just not wanting to be part of Christmas one year. One of the things for me, Rick, was, when people are gift giving and being full of gratitude and joy and compassion and everything, if you're not feeling it about yourself, it's really hard to get into that space. And there was one year in particular where I felt like such a failure. And being around people that were all upbeat and trying to celebrate each other and point out, how valuable you are to them, it's really difficult to hear that if you don't believe that about yourself.
Yes.
And I think forcing yourself to go to something, if you already are conscious enough to know that it's going to make you feel worse, I think it's okay to find an out. I'm not talking about, I'm just talking about like outing, like taking a step away from the celebrations and finding a new way of connecting to yourself. Like, I think if you're able to come out of something that you feel stressful, then that's the celebration of you in the most basic and the most simple way.
And also the best gift you can give yourself.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving yourself freedom.
Yes. And it's the other question I ask is, or contemplate, is what level of energy am I bringing into this conversation?
Yes.
Or this place? If I'm feeling grumpy, I really don't want to mess up the energy field for other people around me. So
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense if you're not feeling well, or you're dealing with a monumental challenge. You really need to withdraw and deal with that, rather than being socially acceptable and having to put on a face which is not really being authentic.
Yeah.
So we have a good excuse to excuse ourselves, perhaps. One of the things about gift giving that we did for years, and because we've helped about 1,200 underprivileged kids here, and we've built 1.5 schools, and we've helped sponsor kids' education, is that instead of gifts, I've said to people, make a donation to this cause, right? I don't need anything. There's nothing I really particularly need. But there's a lot of kids out there that could use a pair of sandals and some clothes and some coloring books and some pens and pencils. And that, then having that fund to be able to go and give those to the orphans is the greatest gift that I can imagine. So that's another way of getting out of the sort of obligation. And the other thing it does is, it's quite time consuming and not easy task to buy people gifts, right? Especially if they have everything, or if you don't really know what they want, or you have no idea whether this will be of value to them. But making a donation to a worthy cause, and it's a one-on-one, it's not an organization. You know that this money is going to go to those orphans, every penny of it, rather than to perhaps an NGO that's driving around in a brand new Land Cruiser in Africa somewhere and staying in some very posh digs. So I found that absolved a lot of the gift giving process for Christmas in the past.
I love that. I think that's a really good strategy, and a really great way of, like you say, absolving yourself from the complicated sort of difficulties of it.
Yes.
Like one of the things that I've found a little bit easier, because also, like, something we haven't spoken about at all yet is money, and that comes up for every household. Obviously, like, I mean, right at the start when you were talking about people, that there are some people that don't have homes at the moment, and like you say, you're helping the orphanages and the schools and stuff that you've been working with since I've known you. But like, in terms of our own direct experience in our sort of privileged lives of having a home over our heads, the additional money spent at Christmas is actually quite overwhelming for a lot of people. And so one of the ways in my friendship group, not so much my family, that we've been able to alleviate some of that is to gift time rather than gift expensive presents. So I really like your idea of gifting to a local charity that or maybe one that you're already involved in. But another way, without actually gifting money, is to gift time.
Yes.
And I find that very useful.
Yeah. And we would often convert that money into a big bag of rice to feed the kids at lunchtime for their lunch, or donate clothing, secondhand clothing to them and things like that. There's lots of things that can be done. And that knowing that, that product may not be that we sell, the present that we give to people, it's been boxed up and it's got nice wrapping on it. All of these things cost money, and we don't know what the lifespan is for the recipient of that. Whereas we know that if we can help somebody that is really down and out because of circumstances, we know we've made a difference to that person in some shape or form. That's a love. That to me is not only at Christmas, but that can be a year-long process of just giving time, giving what's needed, not what we think they want, but find out from, like here, what does the village chief say the village needs? Right? And then deliver that rather than what we think they need. So it's meeting people's needs, isn't it? And a time of giving is a beautiful opportunity to meet some of those needs. And we don't do it to get something back, but what we do get back is an extraordinary sense of well-being and happiness of having helped somebody. So that's the return, and that's priceless.
Yes, it really is. It's beautiful. Something that I wanted to touch on, something I learned from. Have you ever come across the work of Chuck Spezzano?
No, don't know that name.
I might have mentioned him before. I've been following him kind of loosely for years. He's a like law of one teacher, I think, and speaks a lot of the language that you and I know and love. But he's got this lovely deck of tarot cards, like the ones that he's made himself, and they're really quite insightful. But there's one of them really sticks out, and it speaks of, like, if you're suffering, if you're feeling like you're suffering at the moment, there's somebody near you who is suffering more, which I didn't understand for ages. I really didn't get it. But over the last couple of years, it started to really sort of get embedded. Whenever I feel sort of like triggered or angered or less than or this, that, and the other, I now, as a practice, look around me in my immediate family and think, okay, who's suffering more? There's somebody who needs my help. And I don't know if it actually is because somebody else is, but we're obviously in an interconnected universe. We're all connected. We're all feeling things for each other. But the effects that I get from helping somebody when I'm troubled, it actually helps to unpick some of the trouble I'm feeling. Because the moment you get involved in somebody else's life, I mean, obviously, don't push yourself in there. But the moment you put somebody else's well-being above your own, in a really selfless way, it just changes your perspective straight away. I mean, it's I'm not trying to say turn your frown upside down, because these times of year are absolutely compounded by masses of marketing, advertising, BS, supermarket advertising, government advertising. I mean, you almost need to just like not have a TV, not listen to radio, not go out, and then you might get over without any of this guilt tripping that's just given to you left, right, and center. So I mean, it is a really difficult time. But for me to feel better quite quickly, I realize the moment I'm of help to somebody else, I feel much better. And I wish I'd known this in those 2 Christmases where I just didn't want to celebrate. I didn't want to, have any joy. It was almost like I couldn't receive joy because I felt absolutely undeserving of it. And I didn't want anyone bringing attention to the fact that I should celebrate being myself. So I just wanted to lock myself in a room. But if I'd had the wherewithal to realize there are other people suffering that might have really helped me, since then I have volunteered and done stuff, and we often have people, we always like scan our friends coming up to Christmas or the people that we know about and where we are in terms of expats. There's people coming and going into our lives, and often people are away from home, so it's very easy for us to say, hey, come spend Christmas with us, or the next day or something like that. So again, we've got a house full, and we have had for years, but there are soup kitchens, there are all sorts of places where you can go and connect and enjoy that. So yeah. When I look back, it's with a sense of I don't want to say shame or embarrassment, because that's not helpful. But when I look back at how I was during those times, I realize I must have caused quite a bit of worry for others. And to just wish I'd known who I am now. I would have got through it a lot quicker, I think.
Yes. Well, I think we can all claim that. I'll put my hand up for that one.
Yeah.
What you've described there, Louisa, is that we know that being of selfless service is the highest form of consciousness. That we as human beings can selflessly give without any expectations. It's considered to be a very conscious, responsible, and loving thing to do.
Yeah.
So the moment we start doing that a little bit, it will uplift us, and that's why we feel good about it. And I used to coach people, and sometimes they've been out of work for a long time and couldn't get work, and they're not for the want of trying. And I said, have you ever considered going to a hospital and to a cancer ward and holding somebody's hand or somebody that's passing? Just doing something that is not about you and sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself and feeling that all your efforts, pardon me, are not garnering any results. Go out and be of service and just help somebody. And that's why I think in lots of ways, community service can be a benefit to people.
Yeah.
Rather than punishing them, make them genuinely be of service. And that can change people's lives. And the other thing that I notice in your vocabulary, your words which are associated with the 6 heart virtues. So gratitude and appreciation, being compassionate, being understanding of people's circumstances and their level of consciousness, being forgiving, being humble, and being brave and courageous to step into it. So if we want a practical solution, those 6 heart virtues are the answer. So if we're sitting around the Christmas dinner table and somebody said something offensive and we've got triggered by it, and we could look at being more understanding of where they're coming from, right? Recognizing they're in pain, right? And we know that when people are in pain, there is a misconception that if I hurt somebody, it'll make me feel better, and it won't, right? But then their pain can be an opportunity. Wow, this person needs some compassion here. Right? They're really hurting, and then we can be grateful for the opportunity to express that compassion. We can be brave and forgive them for what they've said or done. So this, to me, is the practical solutions right there and then. And if this is an invitation for all of us attending a Christmas dinner or family reunion, that would be it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, what I'd like to do is kind of like wrap up some of our suggestions, because one thing that I am really like conscious of is these kind of ideas and strategies and sharings, because these are just our sharings, aren't they? There's no like law saying this is how it should be. This is just us, sharing freely. And I think it's coming from a really good place. I recognize that there are maybe, I mean, obviously we're infinite, but what really strikes me is there are some people who maybe can't be reached at this moment. And I've been in a place where I couldn't even hear myself. I couldn't reach myself. That's why I was so troubled, actually, is I couldn't really hear what my heart was saying. I really felt hopeless. Like there's nothing in it, to celebrate. There's no joy. I think if you're in that situation, and you don't want to participate, I don't think you should have to. Find a way to do something that feels good for you. And it might not be volunteering and helping others. You might not be ready for that, though I do think that's very helpful. I mean, I just really needed time to myself, like almost like being in a white box for the day. And I think it's really okay to facilitate those spaces for you in the way that you are right now. And then if you don't want to be around all the bullshit and the people who are really clamoring to see you, then see if you can find a way to, and if you feel up to it, see if you can find a way to connect to other people. I found Christmas with strangers to be really awesome and fun, because you get to hear other people's stories. If you are caught at the place where you're in the throes of all these magnificent family individuals and all their insecurities and weirdnesses and stuff, then connect with the people on the outside, connect with your fellow outsiders, the old granny who gets ignored, the children that are told to shush and play and clear off. Find the person that you can laugh with, and feel some connection.
Yes.
In terms of gift receiving and giving, I loved what you were suggesting, Rick, in terms of donating to places, or when people are asking what you want, donating to places that really, really help you. But maybe consider things like time, like donating time, donating effort, recycling old things if money's an issue. And then all the heart virtues that you've mentioned, like the gratitude, the compassion, the appreciation, the understanding. Really understand yourselves as well. You know, this can be a really difficult time. It can be a really joyous time. Really, the only person you need to be okay with is you. And that, like we said right at the start, that's the biggest gift you can give yourself, is to just really invest in you and love you as the creative being that you are. So that's kind of wrapped it up. Have you got any funny Christmas stories of where Christmas has gone wrong that you want to share before we go? I've got one.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, so let's have it. Give us both barrels.
Okay, well, a long time ago, when I was pregnant, I was pregnant coming into the pregnancy with Minnie. I was actually pregnant with the pregnancy that didn't go full term. But anyway, we were working for this charity, and it was Christmas, and we had the whole place to ourselves because we were living at this charity. So we had fantastic resources. We had this lovely big house to stay in, lots of rooms. And so we spoke to the CEO of the charity and said, look, we'd like to make it an open house and invite some of the people that we work with. We work for a disability charity. So we didn't invite everyone across the board because we were doing the catering, but we, like we'd spoken to the restaurant, and they'd given us a load of old food that, you know, they hadn't used before shutdown. So we were playing with so many resources. And so we invited our very favorite people that we worked with and volunteered with and their family. Great. Then our CEO met this woman at some kind of conference, and she'd said she was all on her own. She had no family. She had no one that liked her, and she was on her own. And so our CEO invited her for Christmas, not knowing who she was, and we were like, yeah, bring her over. Yeah, it's going to be great. Well, we communicated with her, and we gave her the time and place, and the first thing that happened was she arrived a day and a half early. And all that happened was this cab arrived and just dropped it off. And so we had to, you know, whilst we were preparing, we had to get this woman like set up in a nice room, make it nice for her. We had to find food, we had to cook for her. So that was a bit stressful because at that time I also had a 3-year-old and I was pregnant. Then she went into the fridge with all the things for all of our Christmas friends that we were celebrating with, and just helped herself to all the best bits, you know. So like for the next day, and it was like, oh gosh, okay, well, she needs to eat. And so we were really, really mindful and say, okay, well, she needs to eat, it's okay, you know, we're very generous. And then the next day, on Christmas Day, we're all chipping in, and she just sat down, put her feet up on the sofa where nobody else could like sit, sat in front of the TV, didn't offer to help, didn't clean up. She was picking her nose. Like, she was like really like the most uncomfortable, and she was almost at some level, she was kind of devious. But that was my judgment because I was feeling quite pissy at her because I was pregnant, working my butt off, and I was almost like her slave. You know, she was kind of, need a cup of tea, and you know, like. Anyway, all our guests arrived, and we had our Christmas dinner, and we were having a really nice time with them, albeit she wouldn't move over, so we had to get extra chairs, and she took the most comfiest chair. And so we were sat down, and you know how everyone wants the roast potatoes, you know, they're always the thing that always seemed to be their most favorite thing. She sat right by them, and all of a sudden she went, chew right over the potatoes. And of course, then nobody wanted any, and she just like moved them closer to herself. And it was like, oh God, what an old man. And then, like, while I was making food, she started gossiping about me. Like, this is a woman that didn't know me. All she had was like a day and a half of actually being quite rude. And so she was gossiping about me and saying what an awful host I was. And so, like, I didn't find out straight away, but like later on, people coming to me, that woman was saying that you're really horrible. I told her that's not true, and so it was really quite traumatic. So I was really getting slowly madder and madder. Anyway, everyone went home the next day. Like, people stayed over that were invited to stay over, and the next day it was time to go. And then she said, "Oh, I haven't. I was invited to stay for 3 days. Your CEO told you." And so she was like swinging it. And so we said, okay, well, we've got to leave to a different part. And she was like, but I don't have any food and I can't stay. And so we couldn't get in touch with the person to find out if that was the agreement. And so we kept her on. We kept feeding her and letting her sit in front of the TV. And then she basically refused to go. She said, no, I'm not going. I've got nowhere to go. And I said, well, we've got to close up now. We were actually going to visit our own family, like just before New Year. So in the end, we had to actually call a cab and call security and manhandle her into a cab and send her home. We didn't know what else to do with her. She was quite well to do. She was very well dressed. And she had all these stories about, her children that had left her. And that was awful, to hear that. And there was a part of me that was also saying, I can see why.
Yes.
So, this is, I think, maybe my Christmas message right at the end is also use discernment. We do need to have compassion for each other, but we also need to have compassion for ourselves. And we also need to know where our boundaries are and when someone's taking a mick. And you don't know that unless you actually throw yourself into that wonderful situation of gift giving and giving your time and volunteering. I did feel like my fingers were burnt, but it hasn't stopped me. I have a bit more discernment as to who I invite over.
Well, discernment is the key. And if we don't set boundaries, we will attract disrespect.
Yes.
So we need to know that. Stop that boundary right there. That's
it was a bit too open.
You crossed the line.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
We've spoken a lot about stuff over this last year and over the last 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah. It's been a joy.
I am very, I feel very lightened, by having you in my life, and I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
I am too. So, we'll see you. We won't see you till next year.
Yeah.
We're planning a little break, and then we'll be back into it in the new year. So want to wish you and your family and all the viewers a great festive season. Enjoy it, and the most happiest and prosperous new year for 2023. We're on our way. The beginning is near, not the end, the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Beautiful, beautiful. Have a lovely time this year with your loved ones or yourself or however, but we will see you in the new year, and we're very grateful for how you connect with us. Lots of love to you.
Yep. Love you all.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.